Great. Well, it looks like we've got a good number of folks logged on, so we can go ahead and get started here. Welcome everybody to another Lunch with the Friends presentation. My name is Maya Swope, and I am the Outreach and Volunteer Coordinator here at Friends of the Boundary Waters Wilderness. I'm excited to have my colleague Pete, who is our Communications Director, on today to go over some tips for planning your Boundary Waters trip and talk about some of the resources that we have. A few kind of things about Zoom here. We'll be using both the chat and the Q&A features, which are at the bottom of your screen. So in the chat, feel free to introduce yourself, put any comments or any technical issues that you're having and that you need to get in contact with me for. In the Q&A, we will, have specific questions that I will direct towards Pete at the end. We'll save some time for Q&A towards the end of the presentation. So comments and notes in the chat, questions in the Q&A feature, and we'll try to answer as many of those as we have time for. So for anyone who's not familiar, we are Friends of the Boundary Waters Wilderness. We are a nonprofit that's been around for more than 40 years and really trying to protect the boundary waters, the surrounding ecosystems, the surrounding communities, and share our love for the boundary waters through education, through advocacy, and lots of other programs like this. So one of the exciting things that we've really been developing in the past couple of years is trying to just get more resources to get folks to the boundary waters, to have folks, have good trips that are easy to plan, and really provide resources for that. So that's kind of what Pete is here to talk about today. Again, Pete is our communications director. He knows a lot about the boundary waters, has spent many weeks of his life up there canoeing. So Pete, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Maya, and thank you everyone for attending this presentation this afternoon. Hope you have a good lunch in front of you and have some good trip plans up ahead of you this summer. So like Maya said, I'll be walking you all through some of the resources we have on our website to help you plan your Boundary Waters trip, and resources to help you maybe brush up on some skills or whatnot as well. And towards at the end of the presentation, I'll just open it up to questions, whether it's about the website or paddling, canoeing, the boundary waters in general. Be happy to take some of those then. So I'll just start off right away with going to our Explore section. You can see this is our home page, but on every page we have this top menu bar, and all of our recreational resources, I guess we'll call them, are under this Explore tab. So real easy to find. The idea is that you're not going to get too lost searching around our website for them. So I think I'll begin today just where we are in the season, right? It's almost the middle of March. Obviously, well, maybe someone's trying to canoe up in the boundary waters, probably not very successful right now, but we're all looking forward to the late spring and summer and our canoe trips. Now, of course, one of the big parts of planning that Boundary Waters canoe trip is getting a permit. So we have a page designed that gives you information about permits, namely the quota permits that are in effect from May 1st to September 30th. Now, in addition to having information about these quota permits, which you can find on the recreation sites, the real handy thing we have here is this drop-down menu on maps, a map that has the entry points as well as suggested canoe or hiking routes that correspond with those entry points. So this is nice for a few reasons. One, if you already have your permit, but maybe not quite sure on what route to take, you can find a route on this table. Or if you don't have your permit yet and you're kind of wondering, well, where should I go in? You can go to this map here, just click on that expand button, and it's all interfaced with Google Maps, so really easy to use. You can see that all these numbers represent the entry points. So say you're planning you want to explore more areas around the Gunflint Trail, just click the cursor over here, zoom into Gunflint Trail area. Let's say you're staying at Clearwater Lodge for a night, and you want to go up, and you're going to be going out of entry point number 62, Clearwater Lake. See those beautiful Palisades. You're wondering what's there, and you just click right on that number, and it gives you a list of routes that come out from entry point number 62. You can simply click on Pike and Pine Lake Loop. Gotta shrink the map first, and there it goes. Then it will bring you to this route description, which I'm going to cover a little bit more detail in just a few minutes here. But this will give you information on that route that's coming out of entry point number 62. Tells you how many days it will take, number of miles, portages, and some detailed route information. The other way to look up routes out of entry points is just through this table. So let's say you've secured a permit for entry point number 25, Moose Lake. But you and your buddies are still arguing, what route are you going to take? What do you want to see? You can see right here in this table, we have 3 different options on routes that you can take. Let's just click here for argument's sake, the Eastern Loop through Ensign and beyond. And again, you're brought to the route page that has detailed route information on this, including a map of that route that you can zoom in and look at. And again, I'll go over some of this in a little more detail in just a moment here. But this is just a real convenient way to both pick which entry point you want to go into and maybe decide on what route you want to take out of that entry point. So we have that table there. And then there's others, general information that you can find about the quota permits. What are the fees? What are the cancellations? Some frequently asked questions like, do you need a permit if you're traveling before April 30th or after October 1st? The answer is yes. You always need a permit when you go into the boundary waters. You just don't need a quota permit. And the quota permit, of course, that's the permit that you have to reserve in advance. And you can't do that on our website. That's a government function. But at the bottom here, we have a link that will bring you to the recreation.gov page where you can see if there's available spots for the permit you want, and you can secure it that way. So that is a handy way to decide which entry point to go into. And as I said, that links to our route library, which I'll discuss now. This is by far our most popular feature we have on our website. So as you can see right here, we have a whole list on the left of many different routes. I think there's over 55 we have. And then the Boundary Waters Canoe Area Wilderness. And you see this big spider web of routes here. And of course, trying to sort through these dozens of routes can be maybe a little overwhelming. So we have this filter system that allows you to narrow down what you want to do. So we have both canoeing and hiking routes here. You can click on hiking. You can see I think we have 6 listed, the most popular ones, in case that's what you're interested in. But since I'm sure 95% of people here today are interested in canoeing, we'll filter it as canoe routes. And let's say we're going to be up there for 3 days. That further narrows it down. And then you can further narrow down the options between easy, intermediate, and challenging. I'm just going to keep it as all for difficulty levels and zoom in on a route from there. In addition to being able to hover over the route right here, we have the options on the left. And when you're over, and when you put the cursor over these options here, they get highlighted on the map, so you can see where the Basswood Wind Lake Loop is right there. short loop through Pine Lake. But let's take a look at Nina Moose Lake, one way to Nina Moose Lake, and what that detail looks like. So you can see it gets highlighted there. You can either click on the side or click the route itself on the map. And we're taken to this page, which we already saw. And this top bar has kind of, the basic information is all distilled right here. It's intermediate for difficulty, about 3 days, 22 miles long, and starts at entry point number 14, 19 portages altogether. Total distance of portages in rods is just over 1,300 rods, and the longest portage is 240. So that's really nice, because probably the biggest challenge on a canoe trip are the portages. Say a wicked headwind isn't going to be anyone's friend, but the portages are really, that's what makes the trips memorable for many people. And that helps you gauge, really how difficult that trip is going to be, for you. If you're a bunch of cross-country runners and power lifters, maybe more portaging is going to be better. But if you're not, maybe more portaging is going to be hard. So that's a good indication of what you want to do with that route. And then over here, like I showed before, is the route again on a Google map. To get some more details, click in the upper right-hand corner, and then you get that full screen effect. You can zoom in right there, and see what lakes that route goes into. So let's say, all right, we want to do this one way to Nina Moose Lake. Obviously, I strongly discourage anyone from just printing off a Google Map sheet and using that to navigate. For that reason, we have a complete list of the maps that you'll need for this route right here. Not going to enter the fray on which maps are the best, but we have the 4 major ones: Voyageurs, Fisher, McKenzie, and True North. So that gives you the map numbers you need. Also, I have the GPS file. So if you use a GPS, you can download the file right here, plug that into your GPS unit, and away you go. So again, these here, you'll find kind of an overview of what makes this route desirable, or the general characteristics of the route, and then detailed route information. And just want to give a shout out to Dan Pauly, who is the author of Exploring the Boundary Waters, a trip planning guide to the BWCA. We used that book to get a lot of this information. Dan's a staunch advocate of the boundary waters. He was on our board for a number of years. So greatly appreciate that. So that's a quick overview. Obviously, you can spend some time looking over these routes, dreaming of routes you want to do. And we do have information on the website about the routes, but of course, you probably have more questions about routes, both logistics, what are the conditions, were they affected by fires, by floods, etc. Now, to really get at those questions, get at those answers, strongly recommend contacting an outfitter and using outfitters for any need you might have in planning your canoe trip. They're up there, they're next to the boundary water, so they really have that first-person knowledge of how the routes are and what you're going to need, whether it's an extra sleeping bag, camp chair, you can rent that from them, or if conditions are somehow different, somehow adverse. So just on our main map page here, you can click on the outfitter page, and you have a list of outfitters in the Ely area, as well as North Shore and Gunflint Trail. Their contact information is all there. Strongly recommend reaching out to them, start a relationship, use them. You're not only going to help yourself, but you'll be supporting that local economy that's really vital to the long-term stability and protection of the boundary waters. So in addition to this route maps tool, strongly recommend you reach out to outfitters as well. Okay, so that is that's our map tool, which is super neat. And like I said, by far our most popular tool we have on the website. We really designed our resources to make it as easy as possible for people to get up and, cross those routes off their bucket list, take down some barriers, some intimidating factors that might prevent people from going up to the boundary waters. So, this is a very high level view here under the Plan a Trip tab in the Explore. What are the 4 steps to planning a trip, right? There's a lot more obviously that comes once you get your feet in the water. But in these spring months, winter months before thaw, what do you have to do? One, again, this is high level. What kind of trip do you want to take? Pick the time of the year. Each season has, very different characteristics. Needless to say, winter's quite a bit different than summer. 3, select your route. We kind of just went over that. And then reserving your permit. So sure, a lot of people listening are very familiar with that course of action. But, for people who haven't experienced the boundary waters, who just have heard about it, it's really nice to have this gradual on-ramp to let them know what to expect and how to go about exploring this jewel of the North. So now I'm going to turn to more of the resources, the resources that we have on our page, and these are spread throughout the website, but they're all consolidated right here on the resource page, which is again under the Explore tab, and you just go to Trip Resources. You can see that they're all categorized by some pretty broad categories, fairly self-explanatory: what to bring, planning, skills, safety tips, etc. And this is really useful both for beginners and for people who have been to the boundary waters 5, 10, 15 times. Selfishly, a few of the resources I made for myself. One of those being this packing list. So we put this together a few years ago, and we have a print version that folds up really nice that we hand out at events. But we also have it online that you can print off and use at your home. And I've been up to the boundary waters and on many canoe trips in Canada multiple times. So I have a very good sense of what I need to bring. But do I always bring it? Do I always pack it? There's a big gap between there. I mean, 2 years ago, I forgot my sleeping bag, and a fleece and a wool shirt does not provide adequate warmth while sleeping, even in August. So it's for me, before every trip, I always print one of these off and, go through and double check that I have all the items that I need. And of course, each person is different, each trip is different, and there might be a few things that you choose not to bring, or additional things you want to bring that aren't on this list. But that's up to your discretion. But this basically covers everything you will most likely need, from the shared communal equipment, such as portage packs, pack liners, tents, etc. Things that you share with one another, like purification system, to things you can't share, like a life vest. That's a pro tip you can go away with today, is you can't share your life vest with another person. 2 paddles in case one breaks. Some might say it's a bit excessive, but paddling with a stick is not a joy at all. Lanterns, trash bags for carrying out your trash, electronics, personal toiletries, and then of course wearables such as raincoats, pants, clothes, etc. And then I'm a big fan of thwart bags, and keeping things that you commonly need during the day, such as sunscreen, hand lotion, chapstick, just conveniently at your side. a goal of mine on every trip is to never have to open up a pack during the day. Just keep it all in a thwart bag, so it's easy and convenient. So a list of those things there. So again, this is just a super convenient list, no matter what what level you're at, to double check you have all that with you. We also have items like a gear guide, and I'm not going to dwell too long on these because I'm not the greatest narrator, but it would bore a lot of people. But just to give you the sense of some of the things we have on here, an overview of the equipment you need, general rules of thumb like cotton kills, which is a common one we hear, and wool is a miracle fabric, which it really is. Some suggestions for budget gear. You don't need to spend $300 on a raincoat to stay dry. You can get some $20 jackets that, they might not last that long, but they'll do the trick. Types of canoes you can use, the classic aluminum and Kevlar. We don't go into birch bark or cedar canvas boats because, those are very specialized and probably aren't going to bring that in with you, especially if it's one of your first time. Talk about what kind of tents. And then here, we have a link to a video that I put together last year for Canoecopia, just 25 tips for a better Boundary Waters trip. Covers a lot of things from easy ways to improve your paddling stroke to why you should bring a bag of Werthers with you. Highly recommend it. Or Jolly Ranchers. For some reason, hard candy in the wilderness is it's just the best. Strongly believe in it. And then stoves, fire, sleep system, etc. Footwear, an eternal discussion on what kind of footwear is right. I still haven't found it, but that's my demon to wrestle with. So in addition to what to bring, we have in this category, we have articles like on electronics in the wilderness. Lots of opinions on that, but it is probably the biggest thing that's changed about wilderness travel in the last 20 years, and it is a reality. So we have articles to help you get some footing on that issue as well. For the planning, kind of went through some of these resources already, including Boundary Waters Route Finder, planning guide, and we have something on Quetico here, which is really convenient because Quetico is phenomenal. It's great. I highly recommend everyone go up to Quetico. I'm not sure exactly what the international COVID relations restrictions are right now, but I have a sense that it will be open again. I'm not sure what the borders are. Should have reviewed before this presentation, but it's likely that we'll be able to go up to Quetico this year. And there are some hoops there. I love Canada and they love bureaucracy. So everything is doubled when you have to go to Quetico. That's the rule of thumb. One, you do need a passport to get in there. And if you're entering through the Boundary Waters, which you can through Prairie Portage in Cache Bay, you need a remote area border crossing permit as well. So we have everything you need listed right here in these boxes. Just click on the remote area border crossing program. It's not too hard. I think it costs $30. Get that in advance. And then you got to reserve your permit in Quetico. And just like I said, everything's doubled when you go to Canada. You not only have to pick your entry point to Quetico, you have to pick which ranger station you go through. But those kind of go hand in hand. And then the ultimate doubling up is if you want to fish in Quetico, you first need to buy an Ontario Outdoors card, which then allows you to buy a fishing license. It's kind of like one of those county fairs where you first have to buy the ticket and then you have to go stand in line to use your ticket to get a beer. But that's so we have that set up here so you can navigate some of those more logistical challenges of getting to Quetico. And again, once you have them laid out for you, it's not too hard. Not too hard, just takes a little bit more time, and I'd say it's well worth the time. And then just some general information about Quetico, what it's like to paddling Quetico, how it's different, like what are some more things you need? You can't, there's no grates or designated campsites in Quetico. So that's a little bit different as well. So we cover all that in that guide to Quetico. Then there's also a section on cooking at camp. For a lot of people, that's a big thing, and especially if you're introducing new people to the wilderness, it's really important to have some delicious meals. I have to remind myself of that all the time because I'm very much like wilderness is the best sauce. So my meals are incredibly boring when I go up there, but I think they taste good enough. They give me calories. But we have ideas for breakfast, for lunch, for dinner, as well as some basic overviews of wilderness cooking. So if you're looking for easy, pretty tasty meals, check out our cooking at camp section. And of course, safety is a concern in the boundary waters. So we have blogs on things like bear safety, which is a perennial topic. And a lot of these articles, they're written by guest authors, friends of the organization. This one was written by Alex Messenger. He lives up in Duluth. And when he was 17, he was on a trip up in the Arctic and he got attacked by a grizzly bear, had to get evacuated. He wrote a really good book about it that came out about 2 years ago. And then he also wrote this pretty extensive article about bears in the boundary waters and how to prepare yourself for bears and what to do to avoid them and if you encounter one. We also have articles on safety concerns. Just as a side note, my number one safety concern whenever I go up is definitely lightning, because lightning is kind of the factor that I feel as if I have the least amount of control over, even with taking safety precautions. If you read up and talk to experts, they're like, it's something, but it's not really a foolproof way to protect yourself. And then we have wilderness skills. This is another area that I tend to go to review some of my skills. For some reason, in the last few years, I've just forgotten how to tie every knot I use. So before I go on a trip, I need to review them. So these are the 5 most common knots for a boundary waters trip. The bow line and the taut line hitch are probably, those are the knots I use probably 95% of the time. So again, really convenient just to spend 5 minutes with a piece of rope, reviewing these various knots and making sure that you're not out there and just tying the everlasting square knot because you can't remember the other knots, which I may have done before in my life. And then other skills like navigation, how to portage and paddle. Then there's other travel tips, ones that are, a little beyond just buddies going up to the boundary waters, like traveling with kids. Article on menstrual hygiene, which often gets overlooked, but of course is very important for people who are traveling up in the boundary waters, and leave no trace in wilderness ethics. We also have articles on photography and fishing. Great to have Brian Hansel, who's a super talented photographer up in Grand Marais, share some of his expertise with us on these blogs. Links to outfitters. And then, a lot of this information that we have collected here is contained in a guidebook that we wrote a couple years ago. Wrote this with the intention of printing it and bringing it to events throughout the year, but then COVID hit, so needless to say, that was paused for about 2 years. So we do have these at the events we're at, but if you're online, you can read it there as well. You can simply just click to read it on Google Play, and you can read it on your laptop or your iPad, etc. Or you can simply download a copy, and you get all the information, some beautiful pictures, some suggested routes, and in an easily to access area. We do try to carry a few copies with us when we show up at various events. Charge, I think, like $4 or $5, a pretty nominal sum for this book. But a lot of that information is contained right in that ebook. So let's see what other things. Those are our resources. And if we want to look beyond the paddle, this should probably be called Beyond the Canoe. Obviously, vast majority of people go to the Boundary Waters in order to canoe. I mean, it almost feels as if, it was created for people to canoe in, but there are other ways to enjoy it, and we want to encourage that as well, ways to responsibly enjoy it. So backpacking and hiking, that's definitely that's definitely a way to experience the Boundary Waters that I think more and more people are turning on to. I think one of the reasons is it's pretty challenging. I mean, it's legitimate wilderness backpacking. Sometimes the trail disappears, sometimes a beaver dam broke and you have to ford the waterway. So there's lots of great trails in the Boundary Waters, and we have a guide to backpacking in the BWCA, again, written by a guest author. That kind of tells you about what it's like to hike in the Boundary Waters, why it's so rewarding and challenging, and then information on some of the main trails. And that information is also available on the route finding section. Stand-up paddle boards. I may have seen a few of those out on your recent trips. That is definitely a viable way to travel in the Boundary Waters. And we have a really great article on that. Personally, I haven't tried it yet. I do like to sit, and that's a lot of standing, but it's great. Again, just great to see various ways to enjoy it. And for the season that's coming to end right now, complete guide to winter camping in the Boundary Waters. So that's kind of our hard skill set, you might call it, both for how to plan, how to get your ducks in a row, and then reviewing your skills. We also have a pretty extensive blog library that has a few really great pieces on some adventures that can get you inspired for your own. And a real easy way to search through this is to go to our blog page, and you just look up people, submit, and it filters out blogs that are marked as about people. So most recently, many of you may have heard about Emily Ford, who is skiing across the Boundary Waters as we speak. I think she'll be ending around Saturday at Lake Superior. We're really proud to sponsor her. So you can read about her mission and her adventure, maybe what a crazy idea in your own head to ski across the Boundary Waters next winter. You can also filter by recreation, and we have a number of articles here, and one I wanted to point out, like article on Ode to Minnesota, which friend Steve Schrader and Eli Nord did a couple years ago, right? They biked from Minneapolis all the way up to Rainy Lake, and then paddled the Voyager Highway, and then hiked the Superior Hiking Trail on a 1,100-mile route that just to celebrate Minnesota. Other pieces include hiking over Thanksgiving in the Boundary Waters by Bear Paulson. So there's a lot to explore here. Kind of interesting adventures to get you excited, to get you motivated to plan your own trip, and remind yourself of why this is such a special place and why we need to protect it. So that's the overview. I hope it's useful. And now open it up to some questions.
Great, thanks, Pete. And I can kind of dive into the chat and some of the other places folks are posting questions. One thing that I saw pop up was somebody asking, are most permits full at this point for the summer? And yeah, I guess wondering maybe if you could talk about how early people should be looking at getting their permits, depending on where they're going.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the status is for permits in general, but the Forest Service did cut permits by about 13% this year. I think that was the number. And the permits opened January 26th. So if you haven't got a permit already, I would move quick. Extend your lunch hour today. Call your friends, your family, and say, let's get this locked in, because I have a sense that they'll go pretty quickly. In the last 2 years, has been very, very popular in the boundary waters. That's largely driven by COVID, right? Like travel options are limited, indoors are limited. So people were like, oh, let's go outside and check out this place called the boundary water. So it's been more visitors. And that also led to some more unfortunate incidents where it involved chopped down trees, people leaving trash and litter. And that's one reason the Forest Service cut the permits, reduced the permit number this year. So yeah, get your permits is my number one takeaway for today.
I think it depends too on your flexibility. Like if you're able to go on a weekday or on a less, not on a popular weekend, you might have better luck holding
Exactly.
off. Although, with reduced permits, maybe that won't be the case this year.
Right. Lots of variables.
Somebody is wondering about routes that you recommend for viewing pictographs.
The most common one is the Hegman Lake route, and you can get a day that's just 2 quick portages to go see that, and you can see that in a day paddle. So Hegman Lake pictographs are by far the most popular and most recognizable ones. And then there's the Loch LaCroix pictographs. I'm not sure exactly where those are, but that takes a little more effort because you have to get up to Loch LaCroix. Loch LaCroix is a big lake, but those are the 2 most well-known ones in the boundary waters, I believe.
Great, yeah. I'm seeing a few people wondering about past fires that have happened. I know one person had emailed me wondering about, if they want to avoid areas that have been burned down, if there's a way to kind of know where those are as they're thinking about their routes.
Yeah, I think a couple answers. One is, probably check with if you want to see it just from the comfort of your own home, check U.S. Forest Service has resources on where those fires were. There's been a couple big fires in the last 2 decades. I'm going to butcher the name, Pagami Creek fire and the Ham Lake fire. And while those areas, you're not going to go into them and see, charred trees right now, it is much different. You see saplings springing up versus kind of older growth forests. I would say this is definitely one of those areas where calling an outfitter can really be beneficial, because they will know, quite closely where those burn areas are, what areas may have been affected by them, and you can plan your route accordingly to that.
Great, yeah, that's very helpful. Yeah, definitely outfitters are so knowledgeable about most any question that you might have. And somebody in the chat mentioned the Gaia app, which is like a mapping app, might have maps available that includes where fires have been. And then just scrolling through the chat to some other questions. Somebody was asking about if there's a difference between entering on the Ely side versus Grand Marais in terms of similar types of lakes, hiking, fishing, and why you might choose one part of the boundary waters over another.
Yeah, that's a good question. Now, I don't necessarily have the data to back me up here, but at least for a time, Ely was definitely more popular, I guess you would say. But in the last decade, Gunflint Trail has really kind of exploded, you might say, where it's quote unquote been discovered. So there's a time I would say that it's probably easier to get a permit and less people on the Gunflint side. And without going into but I think that's kind of evened out now. The big factor now, like especially like for myself, right? Like I got a 5-year-old kid now, and job. So I don't necessarily have the free time I had in my 20s. So my trips are usually like leave at 4 a.m., get off the water at 4 p.m., squeezing all the amount of time possible. So going up like Sawbill Trail or to Ely is just closer than up the Gunflint Trail, where up the Gunflint can be 6-7 hours, depending on stops. Going up to Sawbill or Ely, maybe about 4 hours. So that's a factor to consider. The Gunflint side, especially north of the Gunflint, is this area called the Minnesota Mountains. Tongue-in-cheek reference there, but there's some beautiful rock formations there. I mean, there's beautiful rock formations throughout the Boundary Waters, but more dramatic cliffs, palisades, hillier, rockier terrain. But yeah, I think, and that for me has always been kind of the main difference between the two, is that seems to be a little more elevation off the Gunflint Trail. That being said, like you can go at places off the Gunflint Trail that don't have that elevation. So
great, yeah, thank you. We've got a bunch of different types of questions here. Somebody is asking the worst time for bugs so they can avoid that. And I'll just mention on the website, I believe it's linked to some of those resources. We had Cliff Jacobson do a presentation, I believe, last year on avoiding bugs, what clothes to wear, what bug spray to use. So you can find that on the website as well. But Pete, yeah, do you have a take on the worst time or the best time to go to avoid bugs?
Yeah, generally the early season is the worst. And by early season, I mean early summer. So June particularly seems to be pretty ferocious with bugs. The best time, and this is, I'm not really giving out too much of a secret, but I recommend, if you can, go in the shoulder season, so to speak, or the time when you don't need to get a quota permit. So like last year I went in, I think it was like April 28th, a week after ice was out. I mean, I could have just slept in my sleeping bag outside. There's no bugs to be heard of. There's still some snow on the portage trails, and the water was cold, so don't capsize. But there's no bugs. And then same thing with the fall. So you do need a quota permit through September, but it's much easier to get them in September. And then after October, you're in leaf season. It's not getting over 60 degrees. There's no bugs. That is my favorite time to go. It's most people's favorite time to go, who do it. But the later in the season, generally the better. Now, one thing about giving advice on when to go about bugs is that, you're bound to be proven wrong as well. Yes, someone just said mid-May is horrendous, but yeah, mid-May, early June, they're hatching, they're ferocious, they're hungry. That's when you would want to avoid it.
Good to know. I have a trip planned for Memorial Day weekend, so we'll see how that goes.
Got it, Maya.
Somebody kind of wondering about thoughts on your use of bear barrels for food storage.
Yeah, I use bear barrels now, just extra layer of protection. I like them, most of all, not just because it's going to trick a bear, but seals in the smell. There's one thing I ran into in that April trip, because it got pretty cold, is when you seal them, they click, and it's kind of hard to visualize it if you've never used one. But then I woke up in the morning and, the plastic kind of hardens with the cold temperature, and I almost did not get the barrel open. Like I had to use a rock to put pressure down to get that safety cap off. So that's something to keep in mind if you're in cold temperatures, because there was about 5 minutes there I'm thinking like, I guess I'm not going to eat for another day, but because the bear can't open that barrel, I'm not going to. But I use a bear barrel now. I don't hang my food, but keep it away. I keep it away from where I cooked. Seal it in a bear barrel, and never had a problem.
And I just saw someone asking if you could explain what a bear barrel is for those that don't know.
Yeah, bear barrels, they're basically a very high density plastic barrel, maybe come in various sizes, usually about 20 liters, about yay big, which I realize this means nothing because it's on a screen, but I'm not in real life. And then you pack all your food in there, and then you seal it just like a regular jar, but then it has a little safety component where, you can't just unscrew it. But the main benefit is that it seals in the smell, and then it's, virtually impossible to open. So bears, unlike a pack, right, a bear, or the real problem are chipmunks, right? Let's be honest, right? A chipmunk's not going to be able to chew through it. I've had a bear take my food once, but I've had chipmunks chew through it quite a bit. And that's honestly is kind of the reason I bring a bear barrel, because I've had too many chipmunks in it. But yeah, it just keeps the bears away.
Great. I see we've got a few questions here. So yeah, just anyone, if you have any last questions, please make sure you get those into the Q&A feature. Somebody who was kind of wondering about, they say, I'm worried about water levels. Are there any resources out there for me to check on water levels, especially after fires and things?
Yeah. That was definitely a big issue last year, right? Like it was a drought out there, never mind fires. But it was stark, how low some areas were. And again, this is the easiest way. Like you'll just go into an internet maze trying to find water levels, is to call an outfitter. They have firsthand knowledge of what things are like there. And there's definitely routes that are, pretty water dependent. So like Frost River, which is a pretty famous route. It's kind of neat to do it early in the season, brave the bugs. But yeah, I'd contact the outfitters for the most up-to-date info on that.
Great, yeah. And just to comment on something I just saw in the chat, the website that Pete was using to show the maps and all, that was our Friends of the Boundary Waters website. So if you just search for our Friends of the Boundary Waters site and go to the Explore page on there, you'll have all of those resources that he showed and all of the maps. And I will send out a link that goes directly to that for everyone that registered for this today as well. Pete, do people use kayaks for Boundary Waters trips too, or is it mostly just canoes?
Mostly canoes. You can, but the big thing is that you have to portage. There's a lot of portaging, and it's very hard to portage a kayak. Yeah, so I mean, you could do like a trip on Basswood, Jackfish Bay, some areas, but yeah, for the most part, yeah, they don't work well with the portage trails.
Speaking of portaging, do you have any tips for how to portage bear barrels?
The bear barrels, they're small enough where they should just fit into the pack. You might be when I said bear barrels, some people might be thinking of the canoe barrels that you see every now and then that are, oh geez, those are like 35 gallon, and like you just put those on your back and have a special loading system for that. But the bear barrels that you buy at most outdoor shops, and you just use them for food, like you just throw them right into your pack, and you can keep them outside of the bag liner too, because they're fully waterproof. So
great, yeah. I'm not sure if you know much about birding in the Boundary Waters, but someone is wondering, they're interested in birding and keeping one base camp how to find a good spot where portages are at a minimum for that?
That's a good question. I can't answer it. The issue of birding comes up every now and then. I think that would be something that we should look into.
We can try to do a presentation on that sometime.
Yeah, that would be really, really good. I mean, so thanks for bringing that up. And I'm sorry I can't answer that. The nice thing is if it's the loon you want, that's pretty easy. You could find that at most campsites, but I don't know if there's like a area that's under a migratory path or that's known for a nesting area for certain birds, but that's a really good question.
Different type of animals, but someone was wondering about pets. Should someone bring their dog? Should they not? And then commented, it seems like a lot have gone missing these past years.
Yeah. For some reason, it doesn't seem like lots of people are bringing dogs because everyone has a dog these days. And it doesn't seem to be as controversial as I would kind of expect it to be. I mean, I think the issues with bringing a dog is one, yeah, they can get lost, right? Very easily. And there has been a few, I've seen on message boards, whatnot. And then the other issue is, dogs don't stay on trail. And there can be some environmental degradation that obviously isn't just going to result from one, but more and more dogs get up there and kind of run around, disturb wildlife, could have some kind of impact. I haven't seen too much discussion about that. But to answer your question is, yes, you can bring dogs up there. There are risks, just like if you bring a kid up there, there's risk, or anyone. Keeping your dog on a leash, like on a portage trail, keeping them around camp, so it seems so that responsible pooch, right, is a good practice to keep in mind.
Great. And I think maybe I'm wrong about this, but I think we had a blog at one point about dogs in the boundary waters too. So there's resources out there. I know lots of people do it. Mm-hmm. Great. Well, it looks like we've kind of gotten to the end of the questions that I can see here. Just want to mention again that I will send out links to all of these resources to your email, so you can have those directly to go to and don't have to go searching for them. We also, have a bunch of these type of presentations about various topics, from winter camping to bear safety to all sorts of things that are linked there and are on our YouTube page as well. So those are available as you're thinking more about planning your trips too. Thank you everyone so much for tuning in today. Thanks for being part of our Friends of the Boundary Waters world. It's an exciting time as we are hopefully nearing into spring and people are getting excited about their trips. So thanks, Pete, for presenting. Any final parting words for us?
The best advice, I've said this at a few other presentations because bugs came up. The best advice I ever got was when I was 16. I complained a lot. I was really whiny, big surprise. And I was on a canoe trip in central Manitoba, and it was raining. It had been raining for like a week, and the bugs were just ferocious, and we're all whining about the bugs. And our guy just said, "Hey, when else are you going to be able to eat lunch in the rain with the bugs?" So if the bugs get bad out there, keep that in mind. And it's a gift to be able to be there, and it's a great area. And I hope everyone has some fantastic trips planned for the summer, and with or without bugs.
Great. Well, thank you so much, everybody. Have a great afternoon, and we'll see you soon on another Zoom call.
Take care.